Political philosophy is about how should we design our society? How should we regulate our institutions? And how should they treat us? And how should we treat each other as a group? Overall, what does a just society look like? Just as with private ethics, there are contrasting ideas about what justice requires. On the one hand, for example, there are libertarians. On the other hand, there are egalitarians. Now, these two views disagree, but a lot of work in political philosophy has to go into working out exactly what the difference is and where there's compromise available. Let's start with the egalitarians. They believe that social institutions need to be designed so that people get treated as equals. But what exactly does this mean? And why is equality so important? One of the world's top thinkers about equality and justice is Liz Anderson, an American philosopher.
It can take resources to enjoy equality of status. Someone who's utterly destitute and doesn't even have enough money to buy clothing that other people regard as respectable is going to be despised and stigmatized in society. So it takes enough resources to make sure that you're not just, walking around in rags, for instance. So resources are important, but I think more fundamentally, equality has to do with how people are relating to each other, which I call relational equality. It's about our ability to relate to each other as equals. Can I see you eye to eye? Can I bear myself with respect, a kind of respect that you feel obligated to honor?
So equality isn't just about access to the wealth, it's ultimately about mutual respect. Now, most egalitarians, like Liz Anderson, accept that some inequality is okay when it comes to tangible resources like income and wealth. After all, society contains a diverse set of individuals, and we want different things out of life.
I don't think that we should insist on every job being paid exactly the same. Incentives are needed to ensure that labor is allocated in an efficient way to the places where it's most needed. Some degrees of inequality, I think, are tolerable in a society of equals, but I do think there have to be some limits to how far inequality can get.
These limits are placed on individuals by institutions, particularly the coercive powers of government. In opposition to Liz Anderson and the egalitarians are the libertarians. Now, it's not really accurate to say that libertarians dislike equality. It's just that they want to put more faith in individuals to solve their problems and have less faith in the powers of big coercive government. Libertarians believe that justice requires less interference from government and more individual freedom.
Libertarians and classical liberals have been traditionally a very kind of anti-status quo, somewhat revolutionary type doctrine that's trying to argue that our society can be a lot more free. We're not looking for a perfect society in the kind of specific sense. What we're looking for is a place where everyone can live their own lives in the ways that they choose. So one of the examples that I used was thinking about the freedom of occupation, so the types of jobs that you want to use. And the fact is, I'm a philosopher. I could be many other things. Maybe that's not the most effective use of my talents, maybe it is, but maybe I could be a doctor or something, or work in a factory or whatever, and it might be better for a lot of other people in society if I were to do that. But it seems like telling me to work the particular job or not work another kind of job is a real kind of extreme restriction on my living my life in a certain kind of way. And so at least at that level, equality is going to have to infringe on that kind of freedom, which seems fundamental to justice.
Freedom to choose your own job sounds intuitive enough. But what kind of freedom are we really talking about here? Not everyone has the opportunity or the inclination to become a professional philosopher. There's more than one way to think about what freedom is. Positive freedom and negative freedom, they're the main two. Positive freedom is my own ability to act according to my own plans and desires, to be able to just go and become a professional philosopher. Negative freedom is being free from any external form of interference. For example, laws or other barriers that might be set up to stop me from doing what I want to do. As you can probably guess, libertarians and egalitarians tend to disagree about which form of freedom matters most and which combination of the two our government ought to prioritise. Laws and policies that are set up to promote positive freedom, for example, giving us all free access to healthcare, look very different from laws that are set up to protect negative freedom. Like, for example, a law saying you can drive at whatever speed you like.
You have negative freedom to buy a Ferrari. That is, there's no law telling you you're not allowed. But you don't have positive freedom because you don't have enough money. Now, in general, I think that positive freedom is usually more important than negative freedom. That is, we're perfectly willing to accept all kinds of restraints on our negative freedom in order to expand the total opportunities that are available to us. Just think of the traffic laws, right? Now, technically, red lights and stop signs are impairing your freedom of movement. You could get a ticket and the police could stop you if you run a red light. So that's a constraint on negative freedom, but overall we can see that everyone has much greater opportunities to move about freely under a system of traffic laws than if we just had a free-for-all leading to gridlock in urban areas.
In the modern world, we live under all sorts of constraints on our positive and negative freedoms. Try to imagine what society would look like if there were no such constraints. It's not as if we'd just have loads of traffic jams. Our whole way of life would be completely unrecognizable.
In political philosophy, we have this idea of the state of nature. It's kind of a hypothetical state in which it's assumed that in the beginning, the earth was held in common by everyone, and anyone could take anything, pluck fruit off the trees, dig up tubers and so forth. And if you think about that, such a society is pretty poor. Private property involves placing negative liberty constraints on everybody, right? You stake out your own plot of land, it's your private property, and then you can tell other people legally they can't trespass, they can't use that property. It's just for the owner's exclusive use. So the transition from a common property system where anybody can use anything to a private property system actually involves the introduction of massive constraints on our negative liberty. But yet we accept it because we recognize that a system that provides for private property produces a lot more wealth. Everyone's richer, and consequently, we have a lot more opportunities. So here the justification of private property itself depends on the idea that opportunities are more important and can justify negative liberty constraints.
So it looks like many ways in which government restricts our freedom turn out to be perfectly defensible. Question is, though, how far should government go? Government can only change our behaviour because it's got power over us. Now, libertarians worry that if we keep giving government power to change our behaviour, we're going to end up sacrificing too much freedom, and that's going to be an injustice.
I think the insight that the libertarians and the classical liberals had is a good one, which is that you should be very wary of giving too much power to the government, because the power that has to do good is also power to do ill, and its main weapon is to use the police or jails or taxes or something like that. And those usually just aren't good tools for trying to do the kinds of things that we want to do to make people better off. And so oftentimes, we're trying to use a sledgehammer to, kill a fly.
Laws are not always about preventing antisocial behaviour. Some laws are about getting us to act in our own self-interest. The law requiring me to wear this bike helmet is supposed to be for my own good. But libertarians, like John Thrasher, worry that this kind of restriction on freedom is paternalistic.
By treating people as adults, hopefully there's a responsibility to act as an adult too. Whereas if you treat them as children in a paternalistic way, you might actually paradoxically get them acting more like children. And so there's an important aspect of self-reliance that's about the development of that capacity to be able to make choices and be held responsible. And that overactive government, paternalistic government, can kind of actually tamp down on that faculty.
Libertarians believe that market freedoms are just as important as any other kind of individual freedom. That's why libertarians often oppose what they see as government interference with the market, like a minimum wage. You need to remember that this philosophy got going in the 18th century. This was at a time when the aristocracy's control over the economy was being called into question. People wanted more say over their lives and over their livelihoods.
It turns out that the rise of market society goes hand in hand with the rise of big government. There are important reasons for that. Leaving people strictly to their own fortunes on the market makes them extremely vulnerable to recession, arbitrary firing, illness and disability, and it costs a lot of money to ensure that people's lives aren't ruined due to all kinds of misfortunes and to business cycles and so forth. So we need a robust social insurance system in order to ensure that market society actually delivers benefits to everybody and not just to the people at the top.
The nature of individual freedom and of the limits that we place on it is an enduring theme throughout moral and political philosophy. Obviously, each one of us is an individual, but we are also social creatures. Political philosophy is about examining the complex interplay between ourselves as individuals and the institutions that inevitably we create. When we examine this interplay, we want to grapple with the question of how should we use institutions to pursue social justice? Should they be set up, as Anderson suggests, to promote equality and mutual respect between individuals, or as Thrasher believes, to protect individual freedom? What do you think? Next time, is it ethical to say whatever I like?